All right, got that chime. All right, thank you so much, and I'll let you take it away, Jennifer.
Perfect. So thank you everybody that made it today. Uh, I'm excited. I've been, this is probably the longest workshop session presentation I've ever done. So hopefully, and who knows how the pacing will go. A lot of that depends on kind of what we decide to do interactively. Um, what would help me is for everyone to put something that you're hoping to get from this workshop today in the chat. But then I also want to give you, and I'll put it before every, oops, that's not the button I meant to push. And now I made Zoom mad. I tried to put the link in the chat for you and everything froze on me. Can you still even hear me?
We can hear you, except
Okay.
your screen is frozen. Your screen share is Oh, wait, you can see your mouse moving a little bit, but your video is frozen now.
Okay. So we'll see if Zoom will
play nice.
get out of the meeting and restart it or something. I do want to also note that I've got some poll everywhere activities embedded in the slideshow. So you have two options to for how to respond. You can pull out your cell phone and text. Oh, now my mic's even frozen. Can you guys still hear me?
We can still hear you, yes.
Okay. My little mic's not going up and down showing that I'm talking. So now I'm getting nervous.
How about this to make things easier? If you want to share links, are all your links that you're going to be sharing from your presentation slide? Jennifer? Oh, I don't think we can hear you now. Uh-oh. Looks like we're experiencing
yeah, I lost you guys. Hold on one second. I'm going to at least connect through my phone and then I will be able to hear and then we'll figure out how to problem solve this here.
Got it.
Oh, except it won't let me do that either. Remember that froze the whole computer thing? I think this might be what this is. Let me see.
Let me see if I can help you out. If I can kick you out of the call or the meeting, how maybe that would work. You can come back in that way.
We can try that. Let's try that.
Okay, let me see if I can even kick you out because you're the host. So I don't know if I'm able to do that as a co-host. So I'm gonna try stopping your sharing, stopping your video, and see if that helps out. Okay. Oh, she's back in.
All right, I'm back in, but I don't know why y'all can still see my screen.
Yeah, I was trying to stop it through the call itself, but I don't think it's working.
No, it's completely frozen. That is remarkable.
Yeah.
If I share my screen, I think I might be in here twice.
So I was also gonna say that since you're having trouble, oh, sharing just ended.
There we go. I think maybe it caught up to the situation here.
Perfect.
All right, now I think, okay.
We can see you again, so everything's working, I think.
And I'm going to connect with my phone. And so then at least if this happens, if something happens again, I will maintain audio.
And you were mentioning that your screen would freeze every time you try to open the chat, or if you're trying to share a link. Is that what you were saying earlier too?
Hold on. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to have to call in here and enter everything. And then it's a good thing we got some time today. Nothing like
true.
chaotic start.
Okay, is that tinny or do I sound okay?
You sound okay. It's
okay. Okay, we'll cross our fingers that that will help with whatever that issue was. Zoom and my computer just no longer play nice, I've discovered, and I need to turn my email off here, or it's going to ding all day long. Okay, let's try again. Let me get my presentation going here and share my screen again. Okay. Okay. Now let me get my chat back up. And I missed everything that everyone put in the chat while I was in chaos. So if you want to just go copy, if you posted something, if you want to reach up and copy and paste that so that I can see it, that would be amazing. If you have a moment to do that, I apologize. And then I will give you the
perfect. Thank you for that.
Okay. So yeah, so that is the document that has all of the links of anything that I will share today or that I might share today, hopefully. I will ask it if you find anything that takes you to the wrong link or that's broken to let me know. I caught a couple mistakes when I was making it, but if you find something else, I will fix it. And then I think I started to explain that I've got some Poll Everywhere activities embedded so that, I chose Poll Everywhere for two reasons. I chose it over using the chat so that it could be anonymous, so that if you want to, if there's anything that you want to be maybe slightly more honest than otherwise, I know we're still a small group here, but so some anonymity, but also, and it's better than the Zoom poll options because I can do a short answer poll. So I'm going to try it. It's been a while since I've used it, but I wanted to try that. So you can use your cell phone for those. So you can just text, or if you have the ability on your computer to split your screen, or you have an extra monitor, you could pull open a browser and do it there as well. And I will let you know, I do have two browsers. So when I look over here, I'm actually looking at my other browser, not off into space, although that's what it looks like with my camera. Okay. Okay, so my objectives today, and so when Brian reached out to me, Brian and I worked together when he was still at COC, and he was the administrative lead on some grants that I did, or that I led for my department. And so the first grant was on creating OER textbooks, and the grant that we're currently finishing up that he left long before he could see the fruits of the labors is on developing the online courses that go around those textbooks. And so I thought it was really important to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to both OER and teaching online. And so I want to explore OER briefly, and I'm going to ask you guys kind of your comfort level with a few things just to kind of figure out, is this just going to be like a refresh and review, or is this something that we need to spend more time on and delve a little deeper into? And then when it comes to the online component, really looking at that course design rubric, the Online Education Initiative course design rubric is kind of a way of determining what a quality online class looks like. And then depending on how much time those things take, the rest of the time will be spent looking at resources for the first three classes. So child growth and development, child, family, and community, and observation and assessment. So here's the first, it should be activated already, but okay. So you can text my name, Jennifer Paris, to 37607, or you can go to pollev, pollev.com/Jennifer Paris and respond there. And so I just kind of want to get a feel for kind of everybody's knowledge of and or experience with OER. You have no idea what it is, you got an idea, you completely understand it, but you haven't actively explored it. You have explored it, but when you explored it, you weren't quite ready to use it. You've explored it and you want to begin using it. You are currently using OER, or you have even developed OER. Let's see here. Oops. I'm not sure that will change as we update.
And to make things easier, I'm going to put the link for the poll in the chat as well, so people can click on it too.
Perfect. That would be great. Thank you.
Yep.
That one, I didn't think to put that in the handout.
I'll help out with all those too.
That would be great. Typically, I have someone when I'm doing things and I realize I'm like, oh, I'm all by myself. Like, so I have the links up so that I could paste them in. I'm only seeing one result. I don't know if that means only one person's taken it or if something's not quite working correctly. Let's see. It may be operator error. Trying new technology is always risky. Oh, now I got 2.
Yeah.
Oh, 3. Okay, so they're coming in. So I'll give you now I got 4. Okay, we'll do 30 more seconds here and then I'll show responses. I think maybe when I show responses, it locks it and I don't want to do that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click show responses and see what happens here. Okay, so we're kind of at 2 ends of the spectrum, so that's good to know. We kind of got a basic idea, understanding, and a couple people are already using it. So that helps me know that, you know, probably a good idea to review it, but that it is going to be reviewed for some. But if you're like me, I've discovered that every time I hear someone talk about OER, I get it broadens my understanding. So hopefully you'll find something to add to your understanding as we go through this. And now I have to, when I it was letting me pass through those when I was practicing, and now it's getting stuck on those slides. So that's, I may have to just navigate back and forth here.
I think one issue you might be having is because you have so many programs open on your computer, your RAM might be overwhelmed. So that's why it's so slow. So you might want to close some tabs.
No, it's not the slow. It was letting me progress through the slides with my spacebar when I was practicing, and now that's not working. And so the arrow is disappears. So there's no way for me to click to the next slide when it's in those pull everywhere. So we'll see. I thought I fixed because I was worried about that, and I was all practice, but I didn't have it live. So yeah, it's all right. So let's just go through a brief overview of OER and the Creative Commons licenses, and then if we need clarification, we can. And actually, I have almost everything closed on my computer to try and keep it from being overwhelmed, but that probably didn't help. So the first thing I want to do is kind of frame this conversation and kind of the work that we're going to be doing today and with the next 2 workshops, and really think about why we currently do what we do, and what role, you know, kind of OER and you know, moving it online might have in that. And so those of you that are using OER, you can think about why you switched to OER for this, or you could think about a class that maybe you haven't been able to switch to OER yet. But I kind of want us to think about why we use the content that we do. So why do you choose the textbooks or the assigned readings that you do? And if you've moved away from commercial textbooks, why did you make that choice? So just take a moment to share those thoughts with us in the chat. And I kind of want to frame what we do today, thinking about kind of the rationale for why we do what we do, and, you know, specify, kind of tailor that to your specific responses. Okay, so Donna is switching because of the cost of the typical textbook. But when you were choosing, okay, so someone did some research and shared. I got that in the text too. It's free, updated, credible, So yes, I don't think I need to sell anybody OER, which I didn't expect people coming to this necessarily, but you never know who you might be getting, what audience you're working towards. So again, saving the money, saving the students money, the navigation. So yeah, so typically when we're looking for content, we want to find quality content, right, that shares what we want students to know. And so it's important that it's updated and credible, like Rita said. But, you know, then we have to think about the cost, right? And at what cost is that information worth it? All right, perfect. So I think you've already, I don't need to have you imagine this. I wasn't sure where you guys would be, but I think that you've already imagined the possibility that you can have the content that you think your students deserve, and it's yours. You can control it. So I don't know how many of you have found a textbook where you have to tell the students, you know, don't listen to this, or don't read this section of the textbook, or let's, you know, we use this terminology instead, or, you know, I don't quite agree with the textbook in this area, or you might have to supplement, or those types of things. And with OER, you have control over the book. You want to use different terminology, you change the terminology. You want to take a section out, you take the section out. You want to do the chapters in a different order, you can put them in a different order. And so you really have the complete academic freedom to make the content perfect for your students, and accessing it at least digitally. And I do recognize there is cost involved with digital access, right? So you have to have a device, and you have to have some sort of connection in order to download. So I don't want to ignore that there is a slight equity, you know, depending on your student population, it might be a bigger equity issue than in others. So I think we can probably just go over essentially that, yeah, anything with an open license or that's in the public domain that we can use for teaching, learning, research, or other purposes. So it could be a textbook, it could be a course, it could be all sorts of other resources, articles, modules, tools, platforms, but anything that is going to have that open license or that public domain where they've given away their intellectual property rights of that material. And so this is always something that's kind of important if you're trying to evaluate, and I need to move this, there we go, control bar. If you're trying to evaluate OER, find OER, understanding the licenses is really important, because the licenses are going to tell you what you can do and what you're required to do when you do those things. And so there's 4 different components to the Creative Commons licenses. So you have the little stick figure, and that is the attribution component of the license. And the attribution component just means that you have to give credit to the creator of that work. And you should always note whether or not you make adaptations. And so you'll notice all of the licenses, with the exception of public domain, say you at least need to give attribution. Then you have a little circle arrow, and that's just a share alike symbol, which means the person who put that license on that is asking that you put the exact same license on that content. Then you see the little equal sign, and that equal sign is inherently problematic. So if you're finding resources with that equal sign, unless you're completely okay with using that resource as is, it's going to be problematic, because that equal sign means that you can't actually freely use it. So it's not truly open. It's a non-derivative. So you can use it as is, or you can modify it for your own personal use, but if you modify it, you can't publish it. You can't share it with others. Which kind of defeats the purpose. And then that NC license, that $sign with the no sign over it, is non-commercial, which means that you can't make money off of it. It's really important to note for our students, and when we're interacting with our bookstore, to make it really clear that that license is intended for people not to profit off the intellectual property portion of it. So that doesn't mean that your bookstore can't sell a print copy with a slight markup just to cover costs, or that you can't use a service such as the service that I use to create print copies just recently. And I'll show you guys the link to do that, lulu.com, right? So you could also take it to your local office supply store and have them print it for you, and they would charge you to print it because they have to cover their costs. So there's some legal precedent set that is okay, but what's not okay is for you to sell the book to make money. So you don't want to put a markup on it. And ideally, in a perfect world with perfect compliance, whatever the license of your overall resource, all of your licenses within that resource should be compatible. And I will let you know that part of that was a lack of knowledge on our part at the beginning of this, and part of it was lack of availability. The Chancellor's Office requires anything funded that they fund to have a CC BY license on it. As you may have discovered when you're searching for OER content, there is very little OER existing with a CC BY license on it. So we do have some licensing compatibility issues. And in our books where we were thinking about that, the license does have a little clause in there, except where otherwise noted, the book or the course is CC BY license. So I'll be upfront that we have some licensing incompatibility issues in our resources, but hopefully that ends up creating a better end resource than if we were just to leave those things out. So I like this graphic because it shows the most free to the least free, and anytime that we can stay towards the top is ideal. So anytime that we can put something out that allows other people to remix it as freely as possible. And I understand why people put some of the more restrictive components on their licenses. It just makes it really hard to remix because it limits what resources you should be combining it with or absorbing it in. As you can see, those ND licenses down at the bottom aren't truly OER because you can't do these 5 things with it. So true OER allows you to make and own a copy, and not just you, but your students. A textbook that's theirs forever. They don't have to rent it. They don't have to check it out. They don't have to do anything except save the copy of it. It can be used in a wide range of ways. So there are things that, as I was especially as an author in some of the books that I was using that was not intended to end up in a textbook, but it fit and it was what I need, the information that I needed. So it became reused in a way that, probably the original author didn't foresee necessarily. It can be revised. So we can adapt it, we can modify, we can make it better. Like I said, if you use different terminology or you want to change the order of content or you want to just eliminate bits or pieces, you can do that. It also allows you to remix. And that's a lot of early OER work. So if you're not able to find a complete resource, remixing is really important. You need to find the content to combine to create OER. And then when you don't have that ND license on it, it allows you to put that redistribute. So you can put it out there for other people to use. And I would encourage you, if you've ever created OER or you end up creating OER or anything that supports OER, to consider putting a Creative Commons license on it and redistribute it with us so that we can use those resources, because we need to grow what's available for our discipline. So what exactly does that mean? OER essentially allows you to create free, with the digital cost that I mentioned before, but customized resources for your students. So I think some of you have already found the textbooks that COC wrote, and they may work just as is for you. And if not, that's completely okay. They're not perfect by any means, and some have bigger I have bigger visions for revisions for some of them than others. But if that also means that if you find the book and it's almost perfect, you can change it. I would put this chapter here, or, I don't want this section here, or, I want a little bit more about this, and you can do that. Or if you want to, take bits and pieces of the textbook apart and put it into your Canvas modules, that's okay too, because it's OER. You're allowed to do that. It's the one time where copying and pasting is completely acceptable. And then you and your students own that OER forever. I will note that if you put it into Canvas, I would encourage you, as you're doing that, to think about how you can package that so students can take it out of Canvas. So Canvas pages are inherently problematic for printing and for students retaining that content. So if you go that route, just recognize that it's going to be really hard for them, once your course becomes unavailable, for them to have access to that content anymore. So you probably heard the words or the acronym, the zero textbook cost, or ZTC, thrown around. And so it's always important, especially in our area where there wasn't OER available, to make sure that people understand the difference. So we use zero textbook cost, or ZTC, when we're talking about compiling resources that we're legally allowed to use with our students. So it's either things in the public domain, it's things in a library database, or we link out to things that are freely available on the internet for our students. So in any NAEYC article, a video on YouTube, those types of things. And when we compile those, if they're also free to our students, we can consider that zero textbook cost. And that's probably, and I don't know for sure, what your institution requires for you to mark them in your online schedule. The main issue with ZTC, I think it's a great first step, especially in our courses where maybe there's not high quality existing OER, but you're at the mercy of those resources remaining available. Which means that, I don't know how many of you have put an NAEYC article in something and you've gone back to use it the next semester and the URL no longer works. Sometimes you can find it because they just changed their URL. Sometimes they've archived it and now you have to go see what else you can find. Same thing with YouTube videos or like library database issues. So we had films on demand. Then our library decided to switch databases. So all of my films that were in my online classes from Films on Demand instantly became unavailable. So then I had to go see what I could find in the new database and what I could replace. And I'm actually trying, librarians probably wouldn't be happy to hear it, but I'm actually now trying to stay out of the database for several reasons. But free is better than, if it's quality, better than something students have to pay for, but OER provides a benefit that's really important to students. So I'm going to pause here and make sure we don't have any questions and that everybody kind of moving on, kind of understanding when we're talking about OER, what we're talking about. And so I'll pause for a moment in case people need to chat, but you're also welcome at any time to unmute. And I think I can probably have some help with Peter, if you want to raise your hand in the participants window. I've got things open. I'm just not sure how well I'll monitor all of them live, but this is an opportunity to just pause and make sure that we're all on the same page before we move forward. All right, it looks like maybe we are. If you're still typing a question, that's okay. And if you think of a question between now and whenever, you can pop it in the chat, or even if it's after we're done today, you are always welcome to send me an email. Yeah, I think my email is on the last slide, but I can also provide it in the chat or later. So, okay. So I also want to look at now we're trying to kind of combine, and by necessity, the pandemic has created this situation for us where now not only are we kind of exploring OER as a field, hopefully, and it sounds like your district is definitely doing that, which is wonderful, but also how to support learning online. And so as I mentioned, the second grant that we're finishing up is looking at trying to create courses that are built on those OER textbooks for students. And so one of the things that was written into the grant was that our courses would be compliant with or aligned with the okay, so I'm going to pause. We did have a question pop up. How can you identify a public domain site versus a commercial site? Really good question. So public domain typically is going to be a federal government website, or most California government resources are public domain. Then the rest of them would need to tell you they're public domain. So they would need to have that CCO license or just explicitly say they're public domain. So typically things that are taxpayer funded would fall into that category. Otherwise, you'd have to look for that particular release. When in doubt, always assume copyright. Copyright is, you don't have to put a copyright symbol on your intellectual property for it to be considered copyrighted. So that's really important when you're looking for licenses, but also when you're creating content. If you're wanting other people to use it, be really explicit about that, because otherwise we have to assume that it's fully copyrighted. And so, stick a license on that resource, link to the license so people know what that means, that they understand what they can do with that license. Sometimes they make it hard to find the license. The copyright's usually at the bottom of the web page. It's part of the template. Sometimes you have to go to like a terms of use or about us type of page when you're on the internet to try and track down licenses. You can do a Google search And when you do the search, there's a drop-down menu of options. And if you go to advanced search and go to the bottom of the page, there's a drop-down menu that will allow you to filter for things that have an open license. It's not going to find public domain things probably. So it's a little bit of searching in order to find those. But yeah, good question. Okay, back to the rubric. So I will be completely upfront. This is the first time that I'm ever presenting on the rubric. I am by no means an expert on it. And actually, as I was going through it, I was thinking, oh, wow, there are additional things that we should be doing with the online courses that we're creating than we probably are. We're going to do the best that we can. I think, we have this ideal version of the course that we'd like to put out there in mind, but reality is probably going to necessitate it being not quite as polished as we would like. But so I do just kind of want to go through the rubric. But before we do that, I want to get a feel for a couple of things. I want to kind of get a feel for your comfort and experience with teaching online. So is this something that you're not currently teaching? Because if you were teaching right now, you'd be teaching online. So, see, this one's actually working better, I think. Yay. Or if you're really experienced, that's, you're kind of in a different category. But now it doesn't tell me how many people have responded. Oh, we got a lot of really experienced people here. Or at least the people that have responded so far. Maybe a lot's not fair.
And I'll just throw the link for the poll again for the people who joined the call late.
Perfect. And it looks like we got one in the chat that is a C, so second semester teaching online. So I'm guessing that you became an online teacher. Oh, another one. So you became online teachers probably because of the pandemic, I'm guessing, or it just coincidentally coincided. Okay. So yeah, your experience is probably a little different than your colleagues because you didn't probably make the transition voluntarily, or you did it under significant pressure. So that's important to know. Okay, yep, the C's keep going up, so that's good context. All right. And I think it's gonna, it did let me click through. Now I want to kind of flip this, and this could be related to your experience, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Do you feel like I'm ready? I just want to keep growing my skills. I'm completely unprepared, or somewhere kind of in the middle. I'm okay, okay. And I probably shouldn't be surprised with this because you're here on a Friday afternoon. So you're probably here to keep growing and get a little bit more preparation and experience. And that's not surprising either, especially if you're new to teaching online and you did it by force and under duress. And I don't know how many of you are like me. I have kids at home that I'm also trying to now parent and support their virtual education for. At the same time, I'm supposed to be doing my job. Okay, and we got an E also in the chat. It's always good to see that we are all over the board, and that's okay. So one of the things that I was definitely, it didn't exist when I started teaching online, was not aware of, and that I'm continuing to become more familiar with is the California Community College's Online Education Initiative Course Design Rubric. So you'll probably hear it referred to as the OER rubric. And it was created when the exchange was conceptualized, right? And so they created it because they wanted some way of determining the quality of a course so that they could approve it to go on the exchange, which would allow students at your institution to take a course at another institution or vice versa. And so they wanted some way of determining quality and consistency, but it has much bigger, potential uses than that, right? So it's what we consider the highest level of design standards in our system. And as I mentioned, the courses that we're developing are supposed to be aligned with this. There's going to be areas where I know we're going to fall short, but room for improvement is never a bad thing. So the rubric is divided into 4 sections, and I just wanted to pull some kind of main things that when we're looking at the online course, whether it's our course or the courses that you build on your own, just to kind of some guiding framework for those courses. And so all of this came from the course design resource Canvas shell from @ONE, which is an organization that is under, and they keep doing all these name changes. So I think @ONE is now under CVC, which is the California Virtual Campus or Virtual College, can't remember. And so these are not, it is openly licensed, so I can use it legally. And so the screen snips are from that, as well as the text. And I apologize that my screen snips are a little bit blurry. It's not blurry on my monitor, so I don't know why when I'm capturing my screen it gets a little blurry, but it's the best that I could do. And so when we're thinking about creating online content, these are some of the things that should guide us. So we want unit objectives that are included in the individual learning units. Typically we use modules in Canvas. And that those objectives are demonstrable, right? Students can actually show us that they've met the objectives. So they're not very abstract or things that aren't measurable. And so you can see over here, this particular module actually has a page that's just for objectives. The content in the module is clearly aligned with and sufficient to meet those objectives. So if you're telling students they're going to accomplish this, then they better be able to accomplish it with what you've asked them to do and with the content that you've provided for them and the experiences that you facilitated. You want the navigation and content to flow easily and to be easily determined by the user. And I don't know if you've discovered this with your students. I love the modules. I think the setup is remarkable, but the students don't necessarily, they're not drawn to the modules, right? So how many of you have had the students that have gone straight to your to-do list and just start randomly doing the work that you've assigned? So sometimes we have to reinforce that. It's really obvious to us, but we might need to tell the students why it's important for them to navigate through the modules and to have that context. And there are some settings that you can do to kind of force the issue, but I think helping them understand why it's really important too. You want content meaningfully segmented into distinct units or modules, right? So that it's chunked, and you're going to see that word on the next slide too, so that they see discrete bits in organization. So when they're trying to, understand, if you think kind of Piaget, right, how they're trying to kind of organize that information mentally, it makes sense. So not only do we want it in modules, but we also want to think about the parts within our modules. So the page content chunked into manageable segments using headings. And we'll talk about why headings are important in terms of accessibility. But really you want to facilitate their online reading. And I don't know how many of you, when you, sometimes I'll open up a student response to grade, and it's literally the entire page is one solid chunk of text. There's no paragraphs, there's nothing. And immediately I'm just overwhelmed. It's like, oh, my brain needs a visual break. Our students need the same thing. Using the tools, using the tools of the learning management system to reduce the labor intensity or the cognitive load of learning and to streamline access materials. So embedding videos, using some of the integration resources that Canvas provides so the students don't have to navigate into other technology whenever possible. So really creating kind of a one-stop shop as much as you can. And then recognizing the importance of a variety of media such as text, audio, video, images, graphics. Whether or not I know the research is a little mixed about learning styles, but we do have learning preferences. Some of us like videos or graphics and things that are really visual and that draw our eye. Some of us like to hear things, and it makes sense when we hear something versus reading it on a page. And so providing opportunities for students to engage in our content in a variety of ways is really important. We want instructions for students, so helping them understand how to use the content in meaningful ways. And I think this is probably one of the areas that we could grow even in the courses that we're going to be sharing out, is trying to kind of give context for how to use it. So rather than just provide a video, tell them what they should be paying attention to during the video, what they should be taking note of, explaining what you're hoping they get out of an article. So really helping them contextualize what you're asking them to do so they know where to put their cognitive focus. And then providing individualized learning opportunities. So they could be remedial activities. So if you've got students that are struggling with something that's more of a basic skills level, resources that aren't part of your course necessarily, but that you can direct those students to help with those skills, or resources for students that have kind of got the content already but want to go to that next level. And so in this module, there's some review resources provided as well as some additional resources. So things that are extra for students that either want to go deeper or get a review of the situation. And some of that we do in some of the modules so far. I got a lot of course design left, so this was really, really good for me to do before I go into the courses to do more work. You want an opportunity for students to give you anonymous feedback about the design and the content at the end of the course, but I would encourage you to do it more often than that. I do it at the end of every module. You can create anonymous surveys in Canvas, but I actually send my students out to Google Forms because I like interacting with the summary better in Google Forms. And so part of that is for them to think about their own learning and the process, but also to give me feedback. And so this was an example that the course design resource shared. It's a combination of short answer and rating that you could give your students to help get feedback on the course. And then you want to make sure that all of the policies that you have that are going to help them succeed are really easy for them to find. So what is your academic honesty policy? What's going to happen if they plagiarize or if they copy someone's discussion post? What's going to happen, if they want to, how do they drop the class? When are the deadlines for that? What is your policy on late work? Do you accept late work? Do you have a penalty? Is it accepted without penalty? Is there a limit? So just trying to have that as available as possible so that you can direct students to that and so that it supports whatever you're explaining to students when they reach out to you. And these kind of follow along with that. So you want links to your institutional services at their fingertips as well. And so this was an example of something that you could customize. So your institution would obviously have different links. So your DSPNS service, your counseling, your tutoring, do you have resources to help them determine whether or not online classes are a good fit? Are they ready to learn online? They don't have a choice right now, but what about your library or other resources that you want them to be aware of? Right now, what might be really relevant if you have it is like a food bank. Like we have and it's not just a food bank anymore, it's expanded for kind of basic life necessities. What kind of tech support is available, and make it easy for them to access that tech support. And some of this we can't put in the courses that we're putting out there effectively. I mean, we can kind of give an outline, but it really does have to be customized to your institution. So now that I've talked at you for a really long time and put a lot of words on slides, and this one's showing up different, so I'm not sure. See here, should already be activated. And it might make me manually show the responses. I'll get better at using this with time. But yeah, what is something you already do, or that as you were listening to me talk about those things that you now want to go and do with your class? And this should be a short answer. You should be able to put like a sentence or so in there. And if you have time to put more than one, you can. Or if you're more comfortable using the chat, you're welcome to do that. I wasn't sure how many people we would get. And I don't know, sometimes the tech is kind of fun to engage a little bit. And I will give, so I got one result so far. I'll give a little bit of time here before I go to show responses, because I don't want to accidentally lock people out of being able to respond if it does that. Up to 2. All right, got 3. Maybe about 30 more seconds here. And if you're still thinking and you don't necessarily have something ready to put down, that's okay too. But I just thought I'd like you to, process some of this and maybe connect it to what you already do or what you'd like to do moving forward. And maybe get it in a little bit deeper into your brain. All right, we're up to 5. Let's see what you guys shared. Maybe. So making your content accessible, I think that's really important. Linking to those institutional resources so that students can find those. Surveys, a need to learn how to use Google Forms. Introduced to the rubric, and it goes too fast, but I think it'll stop there. And encourage to use context headers and ease of access to course materials for students. Add links to additional services offered by the school, i.e. food bank. So yeah, you know, now you can think about, and I don't know, we were very lucky. Our where did it start? I don't remember where it started, so I'm not going to be able to give proper credit, which bums me. But eventually, our we call our divisions schools at COC. But our school secretary, our administrative assistant, created this campus resources document every semester that had all the different campus services and the hours to those services and the contact information. And now it's actually become a web page that's updated every semester. So our students, and it's automatically linked in Canvas. So that was really helpful for us to not have to be able to continually update those, especially with the pandemic and everything switched. It was really nice to know that, you know, there was a place for students to access those things in an updated way. And this is the ones that it locks me out from progressing to the next slide. So I'll just back out for a second.
And we also got one comment in the chat too.
Oh, thank you. Easy access. So yeah, that's important. And access can be related to accessibility, but I think it's a bigger thing than just accessibility, right? Oops, that's not what I meant to do. I am sharing it, but I meant present. Hold on. All right. So section B, and so I apologize if this is a lot of review, but hopefully it's a chance to hear it one more time, is on the interactions in our course. And so some of this is a legal obligation, and we can get in trouble with accreditation if we don't show that we do these things, so that we have to show that our students aren't just going in and just blindly fumbling around a class on their own and in isolation. And so one of the things that we should start off with is by initiating contact with our students, right? So if you switch to online in the middle of the semester, your students already knew you and you had that connection. But typically when you're teaching online at the very beginning of a class, you want to be the first one to reach out to your students. So send an email such as the one customized from there on the left, you know, or at the very beginning of the course. You know, I've also started putting like a welcome message sometimes on my homepage. So just something that, you know, I'm welcoming them to the classroom the way I would if I was standing in my classroom, right? I would be, you know, welcoming them into that space. So we want to make sure that we use, that we have regular instructor-initiated contact. So email, comments, announcements, all of those different types of resources. And we want to make sure that students know how we're going to do that and when they can expect that. So I post a message, it's a motivational, or I go back and forth. So some of them have been memes and some of them have been motivational quotes, but every Monday they know that they can look for an announcement from me that's unrelated to the course content. And then, you know, throughout the week, they'll get announcements that's specific to the course itself and the content. We also want to make sure that students know that they can contact us, that they can initiate the contact, and that they can find our contact information really easily, and that they know how quickly we'll respond and what hours that they can expect a response within. So it's really important, you know, nobody is going to demand that you be available to your students 24/7 and respond immediately. That's just unrealistic and unfair. But students need to know, are you only going to respond to your email until 6 p.m.? Are you going to respond until 9? Do you have an office hour and they can expect an immediate response? Do you respond over the weekend? So it's not that someone wants to tell you when you should or how you should, but just make it really clear to your students how you do that. And I love that Canvas has the inbox feature. People always freak out when I share Canvas. I respond to all of my Canvas emails through my campus email, through my Outlook. And so they don't mark as read. And so when I pull up and share my screen, they're like, oh my gosh, you have so many emails that you haven't read. I'm like, no, I promise I have. I respond to every single one. So I appreciate that, you know, it's all there. And so if I want to find something a little more quickly, I can go into Canvas. But yeah, people freak out when they see how many emails it looks like I haven't responded to.
No worries. I'm at 196 for mine too.
Yes. So yeah. So, but I love that it's there. So the students really can just, if they're in the class, they can just go over to the left, click, and quickly they can find you. You know, I've used Remind. Historically, I haven't found that students engage with Remind when they're in an online class versus email. Works better with my face-to-face students. The announcements, you know, those types of things. So, you know, just make sure that students know how to get a hold of you too. And that you provide opportunities for them to engage in contact with one another that you don't facilitate or that you've structured, right? So that in class, when they showed up to class while they're waiting for class to start, they're talking to each other. They might walk to their cars together after class. During break, they might have conversations. We have to think about ways to facilitate that type of connection and community in our online classes as well. I offer it. It's never well used, so it's something that I could probably do better. And so it's one of the things that I've been kind of reflecting on how to do that better. But whether that's a discussion board forum or you know, some sort of, I think I call it the water cooler, but I think that's probably very outdated. I think I've heard more current references, but even like the student lounge and those types of things. And I offer one that's course specific. So like this is the question and answer forum. So if you've got a question about class, ask it here. But if you just want to talk to each other or say, hey, there's this really great event coming up, obviously it'd be virtual now, or, you know, I've even had a student share a job opportunity at their place of employment that was related to the class. So, you know, a place for that type of interaction. And we want to make, oh, go ahead.
Is it possible to use like Canvas breakout rooms during your Zoom sessions to help out facilitate the student-to-student interaction too?
That's great. And I'm not teaching synchronous through Zoom, so I forget to include that thought process when I'm thinking typically completely Canvas-based, but absolutely. And I know my children, they're in second grade. I have twins, and their teacher this morning at their morning meeting, I heard the kids begging, can we please go to breakout rooms? Can we please go to breakout rooms? And he does put them in there, and it is problematic because he can't be in all of them, and it's not always appropriate, but can't be on the playground with everybody either. And they loved it because then they don't have to follow the rules. They can all stay unmuted. They can talk over each other. They can see each other. They can show their toys and their pets and their houses and all of these things. So absolutely, you know, and in that case, you might want to make it optional. I was just reading a Twitter feed from some of the conferences that are happening right now, and us academics complaining about breakout rooms. Don't throw us into breakout rooms. We just want to, like, you know, one way flow of information. So, you know, if they're not related to course content, probably make them optional, but it'd be great to maybe create a breakout room during break that students could pop into if they wanted to socialize. It's a great idea. But yeah, so yeah, and then also you need the interaction with the course content too, right? So whether that's discussion boards, I use in my classes, they won't show up in the online courses that I share because it's inherently problematic to share Google Docs that way. But if it was an activity that I'd have my students work on collaboratively in class, I'll often give them a Google Doc that they collaboratively work in Canvas. And the reason I use a Google Doc instead of a Canvas page is because I had a bad experience with a Canvas page as a student. You have to remember to save Canvas pages. And I think I forgot to scroll down and do that, and my group's work didn't get posted. So I use Google Docs instead personally. And I just set it to edit. And very rarely do I have problems with that. But, you know, it's another way that they can see the work and so that they can see that they don't have to do it all alone. But yeah, oh, here's some of the other ideas. Study buddy pairings. One of my colleagues with her class this semester reached out and asked people if they'd either be willing to be the mentor or if they wanted to be mentored, like the mentee, like and connecting people that felt really comfortable online with students that weren't feeling very comfortable. And so kind of created some connections between students. You can do it with, you know, setting up small groups for maybe discussions and those types of things too. And then being really clear about how you expect students to interact in your course, how often, what depth, what quantity, what quality. And when we get to, I think it's section C when we talk about assessment, you know, providing rubrics and guidelines for what discussion board work should look like is really helpful for students to be able to see that it needs to be more than, oh, great post, thanks for sharing, right? I mean, because that really doesn't, that's not, I mean, it's nice to see that, but it's not very helpful to contribute to the content. So I want you to think, and this could be a conference, a webinar. I really like you to think if you have recent experience as a student or a participant, I want you to, if possible, to channel that feeling. But if your only experience is on the instructor side, that's okay too. But I want you to think about how was community built in an online environment that you were part of as a participant or student or teacher, if or instructor, if you have to. What types of interactions were there? What helped you feel connected? And maybe if it didn't, what should have been there, or what would you have liked to seen done differently instead? And if you want to do chat instead, that's fine. If that's easier, you're welcome to do that. Videos. Yes, they like to hear us, and sometimes they even like to see us. We don't like to see ourselves, and we don't like to hear ourselves for the most part, but our students do. Short videos, though. I don't know if you're like me as a student. I don't want to watch a 7-minute video. Like, I tune out. I'm not a good student. Community forum, group assignments, peer reviews. So having the students peer review their assignments. And I'm curious if you're comfortable answering in the chat, did you do it formally through the Canvas settings, or was it something you did a little bit more organically? Reaching out the week ahead of time and make sure everyone's ready. Videos, discussion boards, teacher feedback. This is the first semester I've had no one organically reply to my grading comments. Like typically I have students that figure that out, that they can do that. So I finally got, I was thinking, they have assignments that they need to fix what they did. They need to make improvements, right? The feedback to help them with their next assignment. But I don't think they're getting the feedback. So I made it extra credit. I said, if you go in and even if all you do is tell me, I looked at my rubric and I read your comments, I'll give you a point of extra credit. But the idea is to get them in there and realize that they can actually have a back and forth with me in those comments. It can be an actual conversation. Discussion boards, respond themselves and then respond to a classmate. When it's something personal, they respond better. The other important part of that is if it's personal, they can't cheat. Well, they still could, I guess. But I get into these conversations about people complaining about students cheating. And my first instinct is like, okay, number one, what could we do as instructors to create a community where there isn't a desire to do that, but also it's not tempting, right? If all they have to do is, not all, but if they're sharing something personal that, you know, everyone would have some sort of frame of reference, then they don't have to look at someone else's words and copy and paste. Peer review, infant class, they do really well with the peer reviews on Canvas. So I've not been brave enough to try and do it through the Canvas process. I know that I've had colleagues that have and have had good results with that too. So yeah, sometimes we just have to be brave and try new things. So sometimes I find myself in that settled category that it's like, this works, I don't want to change it. So thanks for sharing. All right, so section C is on assessment. And I want to say as a discipline, as a field, as a professional area, early childhood and child development, I think we do remarkably well with this, because I think part of it is that we teach students how to do this with children. And when we use what we teach children in our own work, a lot of this happens organically. But I think it's important to note some of these things. So again, anything that you're asking them to do, you want it to connect to those learning outcomes, which should be aligned with your course objectives, right? So if those are all done well, everything should be connected. You can explain that to students. I'm having you do this so that you can meet this outcome, which leads to this, you meeting this objective. And so then all of a sudden they realize why you're doing something. I remember long ago I had a conversation with a student, and a very blunt student, and she's like, she goes, sometimes I don't know why you do what you do, but I trust that you've got a good reason. So I'm grateful that she trusted me, but obviously I wasn't doing a very good job of being transparent in the rationale behind what I was asking them to do. Using both formative and summative assessments. So the low stakes kind of build as you go type of assessments, but then also those opportunities for them to show you, kind of showcase their skills and their knowledge that they've gained, and using those throughout the course. And part of that is to use multiple assessments. And I think this ties back a lot to what we talk about children, right? You don't want anything to be so high stakes that if a student or a child is not successful with that task, that it ruins their chance of feeling successful. I know that we have kind of a policy of that our signature assignments that assess our SLO are supposed to be 20% of a student's grade. I don't feel comfortable with any one assignment being 20% of a student's grade. So I structure mine so that it's in chunks, so that the individual chunks collectively are that big of their grade, because also you don't want a student to get a really good grade in a class if they can't meet the student learning outcome. So I get the rationale behind it, but something that I continue to kind of navigate personally, and lots of low stakes stuff where, students feel safe to make mistakes and recognize that perfection is not realistic or probably desirable, at least not as a goal. Being really clear about how you're going to grade and how they're going to earn their grade. And I try really careful to use that terminology. I don't give you a grade, you earn a grade, right? Because it's on them. How they do is on them. But I have to make it really clear how they do that. If I don't do that, then it's not very fair. So how do they earn a 10 out of 10? How do they earn an 8 out of 10? So showing them as much as I can. And again, trying to encourage them to look at that before they do the work, so that they understand that that's information they can use to improve their abilities. I remember when I teach face-to-face, I always tell them, that handout I give you for that assignment, when you're working on it, pull it out, because I can tell when you have that right there, when you're completing your assignment, you meet the requirements much more often, right? You don't forget things, you don't skip over things. You give me exactly what I'd ask for when you look at that, the assignment description and the rubric. Give them the instructions on how to successfully complete something for your class. Don't expect them to figure it out. A great idea here is if you have whether it's a colleague in a different discipline that might be willing to do this with you, maybe you do it back and forth for one another, or maybe you have a good friend or even a family member that would be willing to do this with you. Ask someone that's not in your discipline to look at something you're asking your students to do, and if it makes sense to them. Often it makes sense to us because we have all of the context inside our head. And I tell my students the same thing. Whatever you want me to be able to evaluate in your assignment, it has to end up in your submission. I have no idea what great things are in your head if you don't get them out of your head and into a place that I can see or hear or read them. And so often I love when you're in a physical classroom and you come in and somebody's left a handout on the table from the class before, because it's like, I love picking it up and it's like, oh yeah, I completely know what this teacher's doing, or wow, there must be some extra explanation to this because I have no idea. As a student, I wouldn't know what to do with this. And I think that's a great place where videos come into play too, providing videos that explain our assignments and our expectations for students. How are you, and so here's an example of the instructions with a video. So this is the instructor, and I don't know if this is a Canvas video or one they made themselves, but some sort of a video that the students can actually watch. Although I find that they don't watch them a lot of the times. I finally figured out I could see the view count on my videos, and it's very clear that not everybody's watching them. So I probably need to adapt, make them interactive or something. But especially since it takes me a long time to caption them.
Are you using
So
Canvas
yeah, how are
Studio?
you?
Sorry, going on with
We
that.
don't have that no, we don't have that enabled at COC yet, but I've heard great things about it. Do you guys have that enabled? Are you using that?
Yes, we do. Yeah, so we have Canvas Studio. It's every single student instructor at the SDCCD is able to use it. It allows us so you can record directly from Canvas Studio using the Screencast-O-Matic tool, and every single video will be uploaded to Canvas Studio. There's no, I believe it's like a 1 terabyte storage limit, so you can go crazy on it. For captioning, there's an automatic transcription service that's about 85% accurate, so it's a lot easier than doing it by hand. And there's also helpful tools that actually tell you, like, if you upload your content to your Canvas course, you can see how long the student has been watching the video. You can see if they're skipping around. And also there's a cool feature, I believe we're gonna implement it soon, but there's gonna be video quizzes. So you can actually insert interactive questions, like you just go over a topic, you can ask them something like that, and you can actually reinforce like the SLOs that you're talking about for your videos, make them a lot more engaging and interactive.
Yes, that's awesome. I've heard really good things about it. And I use Screencast-O-Matic, and I do start with the auto captions and go in and fix them. And I think I must be slower than my colleagues, or they lie. They're like, oh, it only takes me like 5 minutes. I'm like, mine are pretty accurate, but it still takes me a lot longer than 5 minutes. But you know, it's as instant as I can make it. Like, I don't have to wait. You know, I've also submitted things to 3C Media, but there is a turnaround time there. And with everybody using video right now, the turnaround time is greater on everything. But yes. But yeah, no, I'm excited when we finally, I think we were trying to not put anything else out for our online department to have to support, because we had so many faculty that were just becoming certified. But yeah, so that's awesome. I'm so glad that you guys have that. Are any of you using that yet? If you want to put it in the chat, or you can even use the yes or no in the participant window.
Yep.
I'm curious. Not yet from one. We got one yes. Okay. So yeah, and if there are things that can be, so is it something that's exportable, or does it live in Canvas?
It's exportable. You can download it to your device anywhere else you want. You can upload to YouTube too, or any other video platform you want. And you can also download the transcript of that video and just throw it somewhere else if you want to have closed captioning on that platform.
Awesome. So yeah, it looks like a lot of not yet. So it's exciting to see, and maybe as a field, how we come together, because that's a service provided across the system. Your institution or district just has to enable it. And so maybe that's a direction our field can go in some of our later work. Maybe we can create some more interactive videos. And then we also want to provide students the opportunity to provide feedback for themselves, right? Self-assess and give them feedback on that process. Some students do this really well and really honestly and really thoughtfully, and other students are like, oh, perfect, 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 perfect. Really? You think that, you know, all of those things are completely perfect? You know, and then you have, I don't know if it's just me, but I'll have the students, you know, my students that typically get close to full credit or full credit on a lot of their work. And they're the ones that are like, oh, you know, I'm not quite perfect. You know, they're much harder on themselves than maybe even I would be, but trying to build in. So yeah, so Peter put a link to some research for you guys in the chat if you haven't seen that. So yeah, so helping them assess their own work. And I think that peer review process is important. And I don't think that's one thing formally that I found in what I was looking through that's really addressed in the rubric, but I like that idea of having them assess one another. And then section D, essentially, and this was something that you guys were wanting to work on, so probably not necessarily the nitty gritty of accessibility, but it is really important to recognize that anything we provide in a web-based or digital format, whether it be a document, a PowerPoint, our course, an audio file, a video file, an image, all of those things, irregardless of whether we're teaching in a classroom someday again, when we get back into classrooms, fully online, in Zoom, however you're doing it, anything that we provide to our students that they're going to interact with digitally should be accessible. So that's things that you create, things that you upload, things that you just provide your students access to. So they're on another server or another service. So a YouTube video, even if it's not yours, it should be captioned, fully captioned, and auto caption is not fully captioned. So there's a question in the chat, and I'm not sure if you're aware that you might be, but I'm the only one that sees the way that that you're posting them now. So if you want everyone to see, you can change that. But if you don't, that's fine too. Zoom recordings come back captioned. Do I have to go back and correct it? So yes, Peter's nodding his head yes. If it's something that you're providing to your students as a resource, yes. So the same thing with like YouTube's auto captioning, Screencast-O-Matics, any of those services, Canvas Studio, you have to correct the captioning. And sometimes the corrections are minor, a matter of punctuation, capitalization potentially. Sometimes they're much bigger, and sometimes it's going to be really important because it's going to incorrectly, and I don't remember, I wish I would have took a screen capture of what it was. I had something that captioned entirely inappropriately. So had I not looked at it and I had made that caption available to my students, it would have been potentially quite embarrassing. Typically it's minor errors, nothing like that. But yes, Zoom captions would need to be edited to be accurate. And then if you send them out to a commercial service, maybe through a textbook publisher, which hopefully we're not doing because there's cost with that, or any third-party website, you're responsible for ensuring that that content's 508 accessible. And this is important because they can sue us. And if our college was to not settle, which they will, they're always going to settle. They'll never take it to court. You know, if they were to sue us, they would win because they're right. If we're providing something to them that's not accessible to everybody, we're at fault. Our college was really grateful when I went through the training. They wanted to encourage us not to do things out of concern for accessibility, but to reach out to them to figure out how to make sure it was accessible. So don't limit yourself based on whether or not something's accessible, but just make sure that you're ensuring that it is accessible. And sometimes you'll know, like, you know, we had a student go through our program that had a cochlear implant. And so we knew that when we were in the classroom, it was really important to think about not having our backs to her, you know, writing on the board with our backs, you know, our face facing the board, those types of things. So sometimes you make different modifications. And there is a difference between kind of this universal design for accessibility and accommodations. But I don't want to delve too deeply into that necessarily. So I wanted to give the link out to an accessibility checklist in this part of the resource that I'm pulling this from. And so I thought this was a good way to kind of summarize the most important kind of general level accessibility issues. And so that if you have more than half of a page of content, you want to use headings. And you want to use the headings correctly. So Canvas is going, the first heading level you're going to be able to use on Canvas is heading 2. Anybody off the top of their heads know why you're not using heading 1 on your Canvas page, why that's not an option in the drop-down menu? And you can unmute or you can pop it in the chat if you think you know the answer.
Can I actually take a guess?
Yep.
Isn't that just the name of the page itself? That's heading 1?
Yes, correct. So if you were creating a document and you wanted to use heading levels, you would make the title of your document heading 1. Canvas has tried to make it really easy for you to use them correctly. But when a screen reader is interacting with the screen, they're going to read the title of the page as heading level 1. So yes, and so then if you have subsections in your section, then you'd use heading 3, and then 4, etc. But making sure you're using it correctly, because the reason that those are so important visually, they help us as sighted readers that are interacting with the visual content to be able to understand how things are related to each other. They also help us navigate if you've ever put headings, and you'll notice there are headings in that document that I gave you with all of the links. It's organized with headings so that you can actually navigate those headings and jump to exactly where you want to go in that. But that's what a screen reader does. The screen reader will let them know what the headings are so that if they want to jump to a particular place in a document or a page, they can. So for the same reason, we want to make sure that images have appropriate alt text, and that's a little bit complicated, so I didn't want to get too deep into that. But essentially, you want a student, if there's content connected to an image, you want them to understand why that image is there. You need to make sure that it's in the alt text for that image, whether it's on your Canvas page or in your Word document or your PDF. I will note that I did not have time to do that with all of my images in this PowerPoint. So if you go and accessibility check this PowerPoint or this Google Slides, I will get an F for alt text. Flat out, I will admit it now. I just ran out of time. And if they're really complicated, you would actually want a long description, not just an alt text. And one of the nice things about this for sighted viewers, if your page is slow to load or an image breaks, everybody sees what that alt text is. So if you get that little broken image symbol, but there's an alt tag there, that alt tag will show up. So you'll know what you're missing, and that's helpful. And then if you've got things on that are there purely decorative, you've got a line or like a little swirly, scrolly type of thing, or things that are there just to make it look pretty, mark those as decorative. The screen reader doesn't need to read those. There's no content in them, and it would just be a waste of the person's time. One that I think we can all probably, I know that I find myself falling back into this one, is make sure that the text for our links is meaningful and in context. So when a student's using a screen reader, it disconnects all of the links and puts them kind of off into a separate place. And so if your links are things like click here or more info or read more, they have no context to know what click here is going to take them to, because it's not embedded in the sentence for them when they're using the screen reader. So if you put, read about, and the link is debunking the myth of voter fraud, when that student goes to navigate to that link, they'll know that that link is the one about voter fraud. And so they'll be able to navigate to that link. And for the same reason, for sighted viewers, don't use underlining for emphasis. The only thing that should be underlined in your resources is a live link, so that people know what's a link and what's not a link. Canvas does that little icon there that kind of shows you that it's a link, but a lot of resources don't do that. And so make sure that you make it clear that underlining is not for emphasis. Make sure the color contrast is sufficient, and for some reason that got the graphic for that is on the next page. So next slide. And that you don't use color alone to convey meaning. So I don't know if any of you are colorblind, but if you're colorblind, color's not a good thing for you to be able to oh, look at the red text. Well, if I don't see red, that does not help me. I might be able to notice, oh, that's a different color of gray, but is that red? I don't know. I don't know what red is. And if you're using a screen reader, it's not going to show color at all. The screen reader is not going to read color. And so find other ways, and probably multiple ways, to emphasize things. And then make sure with lists that you use the default list tool. And so in the PowerPoint, you'll notice those bullet points, and those are used with the Google Slides list option, because the screen reader needs to understand it's a list. And if the order of the list is important, it should be numbered. So you'll notice in the snips there that those are numbered lists because they correspond to one another, right? So 1 is an inappropriate example in the list, but in the appropriate list, 1 matches the same link. So the students need to know that 1 matches 1 and 2 matches 2, or if they were ordered steps like a recipe. If it doesn't matter, you can just use the bullet points like the slides are here. And here's the accessibility, the color contrast. And so if your text or background is light, there's different colors that you should use. And if your text is dark or your background is dark, there's different colors that you should, that are appropriate to use. And there's different software and things, and Canvas has an accessibility checker, so some of these things can be checked. Tables should have properly tagged column and row headers. Again, if a computer program is reading the table, they need to know what each of the rows and columns means, and so that they know how to read that table. And they shouldn't be used for formatting. And that's another area where I think we probably would get slapped on the hand in our textbooks, because I think we might have used tables to format things. Versions 2.0 will probably be even better. Videos should have proper captioning, again, not auto-generated. So if it's the speech to text, or if on the YouTube it comes up as auto-generated, that is not adequate. Audios have appropriate transcript. And again, captions and transcripts aren't just good for people that need them, but they're good for people that would prefer them. I watch all of my TV and all of my videos with captioning. because I learn better when I see it and I hear it simultaneously. And there's so much more context I get when I have the captions turned on. And for the most part, I have a little bit of issues with my hearing, but for the most part, I pass the hearing test. And I don't know if you've been in a place where you can't listen to an audio file, but you could read a document, and your students may be in the same situation. You know, maybe they're putting their kids to bed and they're, you know, sitting there in the quiet and they could read something on their cell phone, but they couldn't necessarily listen to it. And then also make sure that you don't have your videos and audio set to autoplay when the page loads. Because I don't know if you've ever been like, sometimes I'll open something on my phone and something's playing somewhere and I can't figure out how to shut it off. Right? That's what that feels like to students when that happens. It's like, I don't know what to shut off, how to make that stop talking at me. So be careful with that. So I know our field has passionate thoughts about teaching our courses online. It's not a choice for us right now. If we're teaching right now, it's online, unless your college has some magical workaround that. I know you guys are in a different county than I am. But I thought this might be a place for us to kind of share before we move on to the course-specific content. What are thoughts that you have? Is it a concern? Is it a hope? Is it a fear? Is it a dream? When we think about offering our classes online, what is something that's weighing heavily on your mind? And it could be something that's kind of negative that you want to make sure to mitigate, or it could be something that you know you're really excited about and that you're looking forward to. But when we think about offering our classes online, you know, what's weighing on your minds right now? What are you thinking about when you're thinking online? And if you want to do it in the chat, you can, or you can do it through the poll slide as well. That's not at all surprising. The students are not getting hands-on practical experience. So is that specific to just classes in general, or are you thinking more your lab-based classes where they would normally be in a classroom with children? Both answers are potentially right, by the way. Lab-based, yeah, that's a huge concern. We didn't offer practicum this semester. Surprised at the positive responses from classes taught with Zoom. The students with anxiety are actually interacting more in their class than they might if they were in a classroom with everyone else in the same space. So online classes can be safer for some students, and they can be more successful. And there are different benefits to online classes. Connections. So, and you're not necessarily saying whether that's a concern or something that you're doing well, but I think it falls into both categories, that teacher-student, student-student connection. And I think that feels different when you're on Zoom versus Canvas. But I think connections can be made both well. Successful student engagement. So how do we ensure that our students are engaged and they're getting the content? And we miss that. There's a feel in a classroom when students don't get something, right? You just feel it. Or the opposite, when they, like, the light bulbs go off and you see it, you can see it and you can feel it almost. The energy changes in the space. And that is harder to navigate online and on Zoom, like in Canvas and on Zoom. And so, yeah, being able to kind of gauge that can be really tricky. I evaluated one of our adjunct faculty earlier this semester, and she had 17 students in the class and only 4 of them had their cameras on. And I don't actually have a problem with the cameras being off because there's lots of valid reasons why people don't want their cameras on, lots and lots of valid reasons. But I wasn't sure if they were engaged or not. And so I was a little bit surprised when she asked for their reactions and like 90% of them popped up a thumbs up or the applause sign, like they were actually following. And so, but you have to become comfortable talking to little black boxes or doing everything asynchronously if you're on Canvas. And that's a little bit tricky. And so, you know, when I teach face-to-face, I use those feedback surveys. And then at the beginning of the next class, I address all those surveys. It's much harder to do online because by the time I get to the surveys of the people that just finished, I have students that have already moved on and are in a completely different content. So but thanks for your responses. So those are all really valid. And so I think it's important for us to, when we have concerns, think about potential solutions and reach out to other people and see what works. And even if it works for them, it doesn't necessarily mean that it'll work for us or vice versa. You know, I think most of my colleagues have been surprised that they can effectively teach online. It just is a different skill set. All right, and now it's gonna boot me. I'm gonna have to boot myself out again. Hold on. There's gotta be a better workaround. And I don't know if it works a little bit better in, and now it's not even, come on. In PowerPoint, but PowerPoint takes over both my monitors, so I don't like presenting in PowerPoint if I can avoid it. So quick break for questions, and then we'll do like a formal 5-minute bio brain break here too. But are there any questions about teaching online or any other things that the rubric? Oh, I'm sorry, I missed a comment in the chat. Like students to be able to be successful and to be able to network and to be able to kind of figure out ways for that to happen. And I agree that those are valid concerns. Any questions or other things you'd like to contribute or share at this point before we move on to looking at the specific classes? If so, you're welcome to finish typing if you're typing or to unmute, but let's all, for the rest of us, take a 5-minute break, get up, walk around, get your blood flowing, go get a drink, take care of your bodily needs, get a snack, check in with your kids, whatever you might need to do, but just to take a little bit of a break. And then when we come back, we will get to child growth and development. So I'm excited about that. So we'll be back in 5 minutes. So I'll set a 5-minute timer on my phone so that I keep track of time here too. And then we'll get started again in 5 minutes.
Hello, I just saw someone that joined. We're doing a 5-minute break, so go ahead and use the bathroom or get some water or anything like that. And we'll be back in a couple of minutes to go over the next topic of going more into depth about child development.
All right, our 5 minutes is about 5 seconds from being up, and then we'll keep moving here. Let's turn my timer off so it doesn't go off. But yeah, so what I want to do now is to actually start to explore some of the resources that are available. And it sounds like some of you are probably more familiar with these materials than I necessarily expected, but that's okay. So, but hopefully I can show you a few new things about the books that might also be useful. So the first one that I wanted to look at, because we have the most resources on this, and if it's anything like our campus and our college, this is the class that impacts the most students. So we typically have 2 to 3 times as many sections of child growth and development as we do our other courses. And so what our efforts reach in this particular class reach more students. It is a GE for our students. So I wanted to kind of summarize what resources are available. So we have the textbook, which I'm guessing many of you have already become familiar with. And so that is provided digitally. I also very recently now have created a link for you to print, or your students to print, and or your bookstore, depending on what your campus policies are, from a website called lulu.com. It's a very low cost print option, and I haven't seen the results yet. Mine has been shipped. I don't have it yet in hand. If I get it before our next visit, I will share what those look like with everyone. It's also been loaded into LibreText, and the CDTC used some funding from the Department of Education to translate 5 of the books into Spanish. So this is one of the ones that has been translated into Spanish. If you have not yet found it, the textbook it lives in lots of places, but the place that I put it, its home for me, is a Google group. And so that Google group is there. I guess I'll talk about that in a second, but there is some resources that are there for this particular book that the other books don't have. And if you are using the book and creating resources, I would love for you to share with us as well. I did release an early version of the full online course that we'll be putting out for our grant work. There is a video library shell. And I know one of you was looking for videos for observation and assessment. So if we don't get to that today, which I'm hoping we will, it is in the links, so you can access it that way. And then what's coming soon, it's done, it's just in the process of being reviewed, is an assessment library Canvas shell for the book. So I'll look at each of those here. So this is kind of some things that I pulled from the textbook. So that is the generic cover. If you have the cover, I think it's pink. It might not be, I can't remember what this book is, but it has the COC cover. This is a generic version of the same book. So this was our first book out. We did actually pilot it with our students for a semester and used their feedback to make some changes. And then also made some changes based on feedback from a colleague. This particular, if you're using the other book, I would encourage you to use the one that I've linked instead, because there is one of the stages of Erickson's theory got skipped over in the original version somehow. So someone let me know that, and so that's been fixed. So there's the chapters for that particular textbook. And so we have a 16-week semester, so I worked really hard to try and this particular book worked well to create 15 chapters to kind of correspond with kind of a weekly flow. And there are some things that I pulled out of the textbooks. So that some of the feedback that we got from the students the first semester was that the theories were still just really hard to get. They didn't know what they should know about the theories. And so we went back in version, I think it's 1.2 for this book. I added these little call out boxes with kind of main notes about each of the theories, the kind of the important parts to keep knowledge of moving forward. And that's just an example of a table, and that's just one of the graphics. So most of the pages have some sort of color graphic, just to try and make the text more visually engaging. I do wish that the captions for that video or for that book gave a little bit better context. Their captions are their alt text. And so in the next version of the book, I do want to improve the captions so that you can understand the context of the pictures, not just what the pictures are. Because the students are like, it looks like you just plopped a picture onto a page. And sometimes that was kind of the motivation, but typically they're connected to the content. And so we need to do a better job with this book with that. And there are links to that book in Word. and in PowerPoint, or not PowerPoint, PDF. So if you want a version that you can edit, you can use the Word document. You can download that from that link. So when you go to the link, let me move something here. When you go to the link, it's going to open the book as within Google Drive. Oh, hold on, that's not going to work. And from there, you need to take one step. You need to either go up into the top right-hand corner and click the little down arrow to download your own Word version of Word, or you can open it in Google Docs. I will caution you, this particular book, because of this formatting right here, the purple text box with the white text, something happens when it gets uploaded into Google Docs, and some of that text turns black and becomes next to impossible to read until it's turned back to white. So if you're going to use the Google Docs to view the book, that is something you'll have to fix. Yeah, and if you want to use the book as is, you can use the PDF. The chapters by PDF are included in the Google group, so if you want to embed the individual chapters, you can do that. So the textbook was harvested into LibreText, and that, there should be an S on the end of text there, LibreText, and that is an online platform. And let me actually show you LibreText. And I'll show you how to get to the book. So if you ever remember that LibreText has our textbooks, but you don't have an exact link, let me help you figure out how to find them, because it is not obvious. So when you go to libretext.org, okay, now what? Where do I go? Okay, go to Explore the Libraries. And when you hover over this, uh-oh, did I freeze again? I lost all my video. Can you guys still hear me?
We can hear you, and we can see your screen right now.
You can't see my screen?
We can.
Or you can?
I see.
Okay.
You're hovering over social sciences right now.
Perfect. It was so weird. All of my little black boxes disappeared. I can't see any of your boxes or pictures or anything. So, yeah, very strange. Okay, so we are categorized in social sciences for this particular resource. So you'd click on social sciences, which will open up the social sciences library. Now you need to know, am I looking for a course or am I looking for a bookshelf? You are looking for a bookshelf. Once you go to the bookshelf, then you can find the discipline Early Childhood Education. And when you click on that, you will find all of the COC books and several other books that I found that had an open license that I asked them to harvest, so that there was content for people to remix. So this particular book was the first one. And so when you click on it, each chapter becomes a tile. And then when you click on the chapter, each section of the chapter is a page. And so you can quickly navigate through the book, or you can click next, or everything's a little slow here. I do have my computer overloaded apparently. So you can click through to the front matter, and you can click to the title page. And so you can click through to the textbook. I am not responsible, or I was not involved with the formatting of the textbook. So if you encounter something that needs to be fixed, you can let me know and I will let them know. But I have tried to stay a little bit hands off with the actual content. I don't want to be responsible for editing it because it's too much for me. But you can see that the content is there. There should be, the pictures should all be there. The attribution should be there. We did have some issues with the footnotes coming over with the initial harvest, but they've got them now, so you should be able to find the sources of the different pieces of content. LibreText is nice for a couple of reasons. And apparently my computer, my mouse has a life of its own here. One of the, oh, I need to go back to the regular book. Gotta let it load. Okay, so this download here is going to be the two probably nicest features that I can find for LibreText for the average user. So the first is that you can easily buy a paper copy, and so can your students. So if you want the LibreText version, which has their cover and their formatting, it's very easy to buy a copy. You literally have to, and you have a few options. So you can say how many you want. So your bookstore could order them, or you could order them individually, or your students can. Do you want color? Do you want hardback or paperback? And then how fast do you want the shipping? And so I typically would recommend the full color pages. The cost difference isn't that great, and I think it makes a really big difference as to how the book feels. And then this includes the the shipping and the tax. And so when you click to the next page, it's going to go into your shopping cart, and it is going to ask for payment information. And so if you want to buy a print copy, that way you can do that. And for whatever reason, the price goes up a cent between pages. I haven't quite figured that one out. The other thing that you can do that's probably even more applicable is you can import the content into Canvas. And what happens is every chapter becomes a module. And so when you click on this link, and sometimes that breaks, so if you ever click on it and it's not working, you can drop me or LibreText an email and they'll fix it. So I went to give a webinar on Wednesday and it wasn't working, and I reached out and they were embarrassed, and they fixed it. So they got a lot of stuff behind the scenes that they have to keep running smoothly. And so this file down here, if you can see it, just is that it's got that file type that is a Canvas, an import file. And so you would go into Canvas and you would go to import course content and you would find that. And what it does is it imports the textbook, as I said, each chapter in a module. But the content still continues to live in LibreText. So if you import this live textbook, if we catch a typo, or so say you imported it before they fixed the footnotes, once they fix the footnotes, they would be fixed in your Canvas course too. Now, if you don't want that content to potentially change, you can make a copy of the textbook and it would be your own copy. And if you're interested in doing that, maybe we can do that in workshop 3. We can look at how to do that. But yeah, so, and when you get it into, I'm trying to think of where it lives. I tried to click on something and it froze Zoom again. That's irritating to no end. And now I'm a little bit stuck because it's covering up what I need to. Let me think of what I can close to get. There we go. I need to go back to my PowerPoint. The Zoom bar is hiding my tabs on my browser, so I was struggling there. So I think I might leave it. Ooh, that's too far. I was going to try and make it a little bit closer, but okay, there we go. I think Zoom's happy again. Apparently I need a bigger, better processor on my computer to handle a presentation. Okay, so I'm going to try going back into presentation mode here. Okay, and so this is what it looks like once it goes into your class. So you'll see the title of the module is the chapter, and then the pages. You'll notice that it's listed as links because the content is not truly in your course. It is linked out to a service. And so what you can do that's really interesting with that, though, is then you can put things in between those pages. So if you want a discussion board after Principles of Development, you could add a discussion board. Or if you wanted to, put a quiz or some sort of other activity or a video, you could do that. And our books do not have them, but some LibreText versions actually have interactive content within the courses themselves. So you can, within the book, you can watch videos and you can take quizzes and those types of things. Our books do not have that because they were built in a Word document, which doesn't have the capacity to do that. So as I mentioned, this textbook was translated into Spanish. I had absolutely no part in this other than providing the file that was translated. And I created a generic derivative. So they translated the COC version. And so literally it is the most complete translation I've ever seen. It doesn't even say that it's a translation. They just literally translated every single word into Spanish. It looks just like the English version, except in Spanish, as far as I can tell as a not native Spanish speaker or reader, and not fluent. And so I did create a different version with the generic copy. So I guess I did have a role in that, but I didn't have anything to do with the translation. They reached out to me and were like, do you have a list of vocabulary and which words you want them to use? I'm like, no, I don't, and I am not the right person to ask. So if the translation needs work, if you are a native Spanish speaker or you have students that are and it needs work, then that might be a project we look at later. And so same content with a table of contents, just in Spanish. And it was also imported into LibreText. And I'm going to avoid going, well, let me try. So the library that you'll find the Spanish textbooks in is not the social sciences library. They actually have a Spanish library. And so you'd need to know to go to the Spanish library. And then once you're in the Spanish library, then you go to the social sciences. And then we are the only social science right now that has Spanish. So when you go there, it becomes us. And these are the 5 textbooks that they have that have been translated into Spanish. So if you've got courses that are offered in Spanish, or you even just have students, if you're using the book as is, and you have students that their native language is Spanish and they would learn better with a Spanish textbook, you can offer this as an option for them to be able to read essentially the same content. It will still be missing that section of Erickson's second stage. So I will note that. I don't think the translated version, I'm not sure about that, but I'd have to, now I want to go look, but I won't do that while we're live. That would be a waste of everybody's time. And the links to get to all of these are in that Google Doc. With a tiny URL it takes you to the folder, and there's a link to the PowerPoint and a link to the document with all the hyperlinks. So as I mentioned, the book lives in a Google group, and you'll find all of the different versions of the textbook in the Google group, and I'm considering reducing that just to lessen confusion. It also has the attribution statement that you can copy and paste. Let's actually go into the Google group rather than just talk about it. And now it's trying to let me. Maybe I should not have tried to do that. I don't know if you see a black screen, but I'm seeing a black screen.
Yeah, we see a black screen.
So what I was, yeah. So we'll see if my computer plays nice here in a second and gets its act back together. But I was going to take you, okay. So what I'll do is I will just do it over here. It's hiding underneath my control bar, but every time I try and move my control bar, it makes Zoom really mad. So I will stop trying to move it. This particular textbook has 2 different names, and I don't think I said that yet. So the original version that COC put out, they wanted to keep it with the course name, and we just call it Child Growth and Development. But I really liked the longer name that we had picked out. And so when I made the generic derivative, I decided to go ahead and rename it Understanding the Whole Child. So you will notice that it's the same textbook, just slightly different covers and that Erickson stage. And so this used to show up so you could see everything here. And they changed the format of the Google group, so it's a little bit trickier to find this. So it is, I did move it down into the threads below as well. But so you can see for all of the different textbooks, I gave an attribution statement so that if you needed to provide, so you wanted to do a PowerPoint and you needed to say where you got it from, you could just copy and paste the attribution rather than having to learn how to do an attribution. So when we talked about, I don't know if you remember the slide where we talked about all of the Creative Commons license require attribution, you give attribution with a statement like this. And so you just give it has a link to the title, or a link to the resource. Let me go to one in English for those of us that speak English and don't speak Spanish. too little. It has a link to the resource. If there's a link to the student or to the authors, it provides a link. So you'll see there's a link to the college, but we don't have, I didn't link to us, and then a link to the license. And then because it was a derivative, this is how you note that it was changed. And then this actually links to the very first version of the textbook that was put out. So for this particular textbook, because I use this textbook, I have shared my PowerPoints and my mini lecture videos that I've created. So this is the only textbook, with the exception of a health, safety, nutrition, that has some Texas-based PowerPoints that an instructor shared. I'm still waiting on everybody to share their resources with the rest of us. But there are PowerPoints, and so this will open a Google Drive folder that lists PowerPoints. They are not by chapter because I did smaller chunks than chapters. And so they are on individual topics. And so if you click, you can preview them with just clicking on them. And so I tried to give context so that everybody knew what the PowerPoints were. And we'll see if it's actually going to let us preview. It might not. It looks like it's loading. And if you want to download the PowerPoint file, you can do that here. If you'd prefer to open it in Google Slides, you can do that here. And then there we go. And I think this one's mostly images. Some of the other later ones have more content. So this one I use to create a video. And so there's not a lot of words on the slides, but like for this particular example, this is the same child. And so we talked about plasticity, and so that how once the environment changes, development kind of returns back to what we would hope that it was. But this is a child that is ill and starving, and this is a child that has gotten nutrition again. And so you're free to use as much or as little of these as you want. And again, I put the open license on them, but you can see some of the image licenses are more restrictive. So just be aware of that. And then the other resource that's available here, all of those PowerPoints were turned into videos, and those videos live on 3C Media right now. I do have I do want to move them into YouTube, but it requires pulling the video and the transcript file separately and putting them back together, and I just haven't taken the time to do that yet. And they are organized by chapter so that if you want to know where to put them, you can. And so if you just want to link to the video, this will take the students to the 3C Media page. But if you actually want to embed it into your Canvas page, I did give you the HTML code to do that, so that students don't have to navigate outside of Canvas to view the videos. And so once I get them into YouTube, you'll have more options. So that is my goal. And then other people can post here. You do have to join to post. You do not have to join to view. So all of this is publicly available. But as soon as you want to share your things, then you just need to, up here towards the top, there'll be a request to join button. And if you do that, then I'll approve you. I do ask that if you're emailing, if your Google account is not with an academic email address, in the join request, you can just share a little bit about yourself, maybe what college you're from or something, just so that I try and be thoughtful about who I let in so that we make sure that it doesn't become something that gets taken over by people with less than good intent. Got to get my PowerPoint again here. So one of the other resources to know about, so the Department of Ed also funded the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges Open Educational Resources Initiative, hereon known as ASCCC OERI, because that's a mouthful. It's still a mouthful, to create video shells for the CAP 8 or Core 8 classes. And so the best way to find them is to find them in Canvas Commons by searching. That's the easiest way to get to them. And just search for ASCCC and then look through and you'll find all 8 of those. There's probably about a dozen different things that'll come up when you search that way. Once you go into the course, then you can preview it before you import it, and then you could import it. I would not import it into your live class. Ask I don't know if that's Brian or people under Brian, ask someone for a sandbox shell so that you can, that would be okay, perfect. Ask, and hopefully it's okay that they ask for a sandbox shell, and then you could just pull the bits and pieces that you wanted in your classes over as an instructor. And so these are the videos that were compiled for this particular course. So you can see one on associative play, babbling, social learning, cognitive development in infants, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think there's 15 to 20 videos per course. We do notice that right now they're not entirely user-friendly. In order of taking them off of our page and putting them someplace else. I'm not sure how likely it is that that will change. Most of the pages, and I believe, still have a QR code associated with the videos, and that gives you a direct link to the videos if that is helpful. So we didn't necessarily think about kind of like I gave you the embed code, we need to do that with those two so that you can pull them because they're also in 3C Media. We pulled them all out of their source content and pulled them together. So yes, so there are video shells for that. And then there's also the early release of a full online course. So if you are teaching this class in the spring and you haven't ever taught it online before, or you've taught it and you want to see if there's some things that you want to borrow or adapt or change based on the organization of the course that I created, you can find that. It is linked in the Google Doc, but it is also, you can search for it in the Canvas Commons. If you are not logged into your instance or an instance of Canvas and you click on the link, it's not going to take you to the course. If you did not already, if you've not already discovered that, the links to courses in Canvas Commons only work when you're logged into Canvas. Otherwise, it just takes you to a general search page, and it's very confusing. And so let's see. I'll go into the course here so you can see it. Let me go and find the one in Commons. I want to make sure I'm showing the one that is shared with everybody else and not getting into something that's different. So without importing it, you can do a decent job of previewing. That's an improvement. Historically, Canvas did not allow you to preview, and so you had to download everything before you could see what was in it. Now you can at least preview the content, and so you can see some of the resources that are available. And so Module 1 is kind of a Start Here module, and so it is not course specific, and so this module will be relatively similar in all of the classes, and so it's just some resources to kind of orient students to the course, get some information about them, have them help create ground rules, et cetera. And so this would be one that you would modify to meet your personal needs if needed. You might also need to look at the points came from a course that was structured entirely differently, and the weight of the points probably doesn't make sense anymore. I didn't have time to put my math hat on and look at those points. So just kind of be thoughtful about the overall points if you choose to use the course. And then from here on out, each of the modules is over a chapter. And so there is an introduction. Let's see. There's an introduction page for every module that gives you an overview, the objectives, and then a place for you to describe or create a video. Oh, it's going to make me navigate every page. It's not letting me fully go through the modules. That's not very helpful. And so then you'll see the next part of the module, oops, sorry, go back to module 2, is a link to read the chapter. And it is not the LibreText version. It is just a PDF of the chapter. So you could put the LibreText version there if you preferred. Videos for the chapter, a discussion board, an activity, and that's a fun one. They take on the role of one of the theorists and create tweets and then reply to each other. And so that's a hilarious activity. It's very fun. a quiz, reflection and feedback survey, and then an end of the module page. And so every single module is structured the same way. Introduction, chapter, videos, discussion board, activity, quiz. If there's an assignment, the assignments, and the video reaction assignment's outdated because the videos that I used to do it over are no longer available from the same sources. So that assignment needs to be updated. And then the survey, and then the end of the module page. And so if you're using the textbook, or maybe even if you're not, but you're using another textbook and you wanted to go in here, you could pull these bits and pieces out. And again, you can download or import the course directly into your course. I wouldn't do that if it's live, for sure. I would encourage you to do it into a sandbox. And then once you're in your sandbox course, you can copy the bits and pieces over that you really want to show up in your course. Or if you really like the course and you want to use it and just tweak it, then maybe you do want to import the whole course. So that's an option. And then, and if there's questions, you're always welcome to interrupt me out loud or in the chat. I'll pause at the end of this to ask questions, but you're always welcome to interrupt me. And then the last thing that I am not responsible for, but that I am aware of is, and some of you may actually have colleagues or maybe even contribute to it. I'm not exactly sure who was on the list of contributors. June Milovich applied for funding through the AFCCC OERI to create assessment shells or collections for all of the courses. Built around the open textbooks, the OER textbooks. And so, as I mentioned, they're done, but they're in process of being reviewed. And so I'm not sure exactly when they'll be released, but hopefully very relatively soon. But I had a preview. This may not be the final version. This is a in-transit version of what they did, but this was what they've compiled as far as discussions and assignments, and the assignments all have rubrics. And so you can import those and modify them as needed if desired once those are available. And they will be on the Canvas Commons, and I will definitely shout out about that through any media outlets that I have, Twitter and my email list. So questions about child growth and development resources, or anything you want me to go back and show you more in depth, or anything you want to share about child growth and development, or how this might connect with what you guys are doing in your departments.
Hey Jennifer, it's Donna Cecil. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm totally fangirling on you. You know that. You know you're my favorite person besides Cindy at COC.
Well, thank you.
I have a question, a couple questions. So
Okay.
Can we put each chapter into the module separately? Is each chapter, I'm using your textbook now, but I cannot find individual PDFs for each chapter unless I copy and paste.
Let me show you where. Don't do that.
Okay.
PDF, yeah, you don't want to do that if you can avoid it. There are the chapters by PDF, and they are in the Google group. I just have to get
They're
to that
in the Google group. Okay, I just have
Mhm.
not looked close enough. I'm in that Google group, so I must have missed it.
With the wrong cover, and some of them don't have the cover on them. The cover just confuses your students because your students don't come to COC and take ECE 101, but let's take a peek and see what they look like. I don't remember how they did this one. Let's see. And of course, it's going to take forever to load. So if you want to, so there's no cover page. And so they exist like this. So that's the way I've embedded it in my online class. I just link to the PDF, and then the students can download it, and they don't actually have to be on the internet to read it if they want. They can exist if they have the memory on their computers. So that is what I do too. I give them the whole book, but then I also give them the chapters exactly where they're working with the chapters. So yes.
I give them the option of all the different ways to get to the textbook, LibreText, all of them, I'm like, you choose whatever you want to do, you go for it. but it would be nice to embed the PDF because I'm going to redo my course. My second question is, we got a grant, a workforce development grant, to develop a full sandbox for what we call our human growth and development. And we're going to develop 2 different options for faculty. One is a resource to a commercial textbook, and of course I'm using yours, and the option is for an OER. My question is when I go to use the resources from the ASDCC module, how do I give you acknowledgement on that? I mean, I'm tweaking some of it. It won't be an exact copy, but I'll be using some of the things you're bringing over. And I'm not sure how to give you credit for that ASCC module or whole shell.
So the whole shell, that's a really good question. It's not something that's on there. It's probably something that needs to be added to all of them. And that's the only course that it's all me, the Child Growth and Development one. All of the other ones, I'm pooling department resources. Because the rest of them, it's going to have a contributors page. And so it'll just have all of the people that contributed to them. But what I need to do is put, and that's a really good point. And so maybe if you could even drop me an email to remind me, I can try and throw together an attribution statement that you could just pop on the bottom of whatever you're borrowing. I'm personally not going to be going after anybody and being like, you didn't attribute me, you didn't, that's not my goal for sharing. Now, there are some people that feel differently, and I'll respect that. I don't really care that I necessarily get credit. It helps when you're trying to find out, remember, like if you're like me and you've shared things with colleagues for the years, you're like, okay, I know I got this from someone, but I don't remember who, so I don't know who to give credit when you're trying to share it with the next person. So that might be the only reason to think about it. But as you're pulling things over, you could just put an attribution statement at the bottom, and if it's just used as is, it could just be the attribution statement. If it's you modified it, you could just say remixed or adapted from the attribution statement. And then that should link to that course. Now it won't link. That's a good question though, because that gives students.
They can't link
they're supposed to have an instructor.
That.
It won't without an account, but not that students can't figure out how to give an account. But that's a really important thing to think about. So I'm so glad that you asked that. Let me put this on my list of considerations of how to correctly, and maybe that will just be, wow. My quizzes, they're open book, open note for my students, but I know not everybody does the same thing.
And that was the second thing. I'm not going to use the quizzes you created. I'm going to create, because I've already created quizzes, because I'm using some of them are yours, some of them are mine, but my goal is, so anyone who comes to San Diego Community College District that wants to, for a 101 sandbox, they'll get it and then they can export it. But I want to create a test bank based on the textbook. No essay questions, because I refuse to do essay questions because I don't want to read them. I'm lazy.
And grade them.
It's bad enough to read online, but let's not do an essay question to kill ourselves. So what I'm looking at, similar to what you did in your test bank, your quiz banks, but have a fully quiz bank with, 15 multiple choice, 15 true false, 15 matching. And I'm going to write those. And I do need to be able to give you credit if I use one of your quiz questions.
So I think the best place to do that. Yeah. Especially with a test bank. So I was thinking if it was a quiz, you can just put it at the bottom of your instructions. But if it's a test bank, a quiz bank, that's a little bit trickier. So it might just be a matter, and here's the thing, we're in uncharted territories, I think, with OER. So one of the best things about OER is that there is no one right way to do things. There is no one format that it has to be when you're doing attributions, which is both a curse and a blessing. But, you know, I'm thinking if you even just put a contribution page in the sandbox that just said, you know, quiz questions were compiled by Donna Cecil, Jennifer Perry, you know, however you wanted to do that, just so, yeah, it's a little bit tricky. And there is no, and I've been trying with my role for the OERI is trying to figure out how to help support people in giving proper attribution and creating some sort of style guide. And it's just inherently challenging because there's so many different types of resources. You know, if it was all document based, it would be really easier. Stick that as a footer or stick it at the bottom of your document. But no, you post some really thoughtful questions that I'll mull around with and maybe reach out to my compadres that also have OER textbooks and see if they've run into similar issues and what they've done. But it's something really important for me to think about with the sharing all of these courses out is what is going to be the most effective way to help people know how to give credit and to model that. I'm all about making it as easy as possible and as less confusing as possible, but because it's so complex, that just becomes really tricky. So yeah, you and I touch base, and then hopefully whatever we figure out, I'll be able to kind of put out to the larger community for reference too. So no, great questions. Thank you.
And my last thing I'm going to say to you is the 20th, your next one, you may not have as many people because that is the CTC meeting for the pilot program.
Yes, it is.
Just an FYI, I won't be there, so hopefully this will be recorded. And Peter, for the district, can you, I don't know, and I didn't see how a format that I could put into the shell so I could say to an instructor, you know, here's the district link on how to attribute information that you get from OERs. Do we have something like that in the district?
A copyright page, something like that?
Yeah, you know, we have the format. I know we have a copyright page for certain things that says don't do it, but maybe the district, I don't know who, we could get somebody that said, you know, something that says if you're going to use an OER, this is how you format it. This is what you're looking for. Just like a reference.
Like a how-to guide, just
yeah. And that could be one of the links we could have, you know, somewhere.
Yeah, I'll definitely ask around everyone in my department, see if we have something like that, and I'll push it out and see, and I'll email you too if I find it, okay?
Because child development's about to explode in OER, so especially with the CAP 8 that we're trying to push through. Which you have no idea what I'm talking about, Peter, but Jennifer and Maria know.
Yes.
I'm not in the clique.
And
no, we're not good. You have to take a child development course, then we'll let you in. No, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, no, and if you create something that you think would be useful outside of your district or that could be modified outside of your district, I'd love for you to pop an open license on that and share that out so that it could be collected with some of the resources that, you know, so as the next person asks a similar question, it's always nice when we start to build resources that instead of being like, oh, that's a great question, I don't know the answer yet, if we're like, hey, I got a resource for you, here's a link. But yes,
now,
it's easy to do attributions when you borrow everything, but it's much trickier when you start remixing.
Yes. So for all the child development OERs that are coming out, are all of the ASCC developmental shells that they're doing, are all of those going to be CAP 8 enhanced aligned?
I don't think they're the enhanced aligned. I can confirm with June with hers, they might be because she was part of that work, so she would have been in on that early enough to potentially have accommodated that with the assignments. So I'm not sure if they're the textbooks are not going to have some of the newer things necessarily reflected nor are the COC online classes probably. They're not all done, so there's a chance. We haven't even looked at modifying our curriculum to the modified CAP outlines yet. So I don't know if behind's fair, but I think we do want to pilot the TPEs and all of that. So I won't be at the other meeting next week because, you can never find a time where there's not other things already scheduled. It's kind of a bummer, but but yeah, we'll record this so that people can get in and watch that and catch up. But I lost my train of thought. Oh, so that hopefully with later iterations of some of this work, it'll be more transparent, that more of the diversity, more of the, I'm trying to think what the three, off the top of my head, the three main things that June said that they kind of had to sprinkle in to the outlines that weren't there, probably aren't adequately reflected in what we're going to be doing, but hopefully in later revisions that can be accomplished. But that's a good question.
We have 5 years to worry about TPEs, but I mean, I think that we're all looking at aligning, and I know there's a couple things in Commons. There's a couple ones that say they're cap enhanced aligned. I think Donna Green may have done one, but sorry, I'll stop eating up everyone's time. I was just curious about the cap aid enhancement.
Yeah, the stuff that I'm doing and the stuff that June Milovich, there's the ill part. I just combined her names and I renamed her.
She'd be fine
I'm not
with it.
sure. Yeah, she's pretty sweet. So I'll have to reach out to her and see, so that if the question comes up, and I think that her shells are kind of comprehensive enough that it wouldn't probably be blankly really transparent one way or the other, whether that they were, I'm guessing, with some of the assessments and that type of stuff. And hopefully as we continue to grow the resources, whether it's the video shells that the CDE funded through the OERI, or Jill, goodness, now I'm going to call her Jill in perpetuity, June put together, funded by the OERI, or the stuff that COC is putting out that was funded by the CVC OEI grant, hopefully, and the books and everything. Hopefully, as we continue to make them better, we can bring in those things that should probably have been there anyways, but just maybe weren't as strongly on the radar as they should be. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, everyone.
Absolutely. So I think we're almost, and so I think we got about 15 minutes. So let me look. So the other resources, it's going to look very, very similar. They're just going to have different links. But that's, for the most part, they're going to have a little bit less available, because the course, there is no early release course for any of these yet. That is my winter project and probably my spring project. Even though it should have already been done. But then the pandemic hit and my summer got taken over by rethinking and reimagining what ECE is in a pandemic and how we're going to assess everything. And then on top of everything, for those of you that are in our area, we are pursuing higher ed accreditation through NAEYC. So we've been doing a lot of work. And so trying to kind of find time to balance and coordinate all of this has been inherently complicated. So you'll notice this slide's shorter, but the textbook is available in the same ways, digitally, the link to print. Oh, and that's the one thing that and it lives in a Google group. It's been translated and it's in LibreText in both ways, but let me show you the textbooks that you can print. And hopefully I will have them at the next 2 workshops to be able to actually put up in front of the camera. And so oops, that's not what I wanted to do. So I went through, I will say this particular book, I was looking at the formatting. I want to redo this because there's some really funky page breaks and things that I don't like, that I didn't catch and aren't fixed in this version. But what I did is I went through, I uploaded the PDF files, created these beautiful covers, and they're in full color, paperback bound, and the most expensive textbook is still under $25. And so that's over a 500-page textbook, and it's in color. And so it's a really affordable option for your students or your faculty, maybe even more so your faculty that really want that print copy and they want the color version to make it a little bit more engaging. And so the links to print these are in that document, and they're also in all of the Google groups. So you should be able, if you're bumbling around enough, you should be able to bump into a link to print them. And if not, you can always just email me. I tried to put something in the chat and it froze me again. don't like having my hands tied like this. I'm going to have to figure out what else I can do in the background of my computer to make it happier for later Zoom sessions. This is very obnoxious. It's never been this bad before. So I don't know how much of it's internet related. I tried to chat again. It's not going to let me. So my email address is just jennifer.paris@canyons, CANYONS.edu. So you can always email me for a direct link. And if I can get my screen back, there we go. And so that was something that I just did last week, I believe, or maybe it was this week. All the weeks are running together. And so shared out those links. And so I'm excited to see what they look like. I had a colleague who I learned about this because she figured it out for her students. So she actually held up, we were in a webinar and she held up one of our textbooks. And I'm like, oh, that's beautiful. How did you do that? And she's like, oh, I did it through lulu.com. So there was a relatively not a steep learning curve. I just kept making silly mistakes and had to keep going back and fixing them. But you can actually, if you guys create a resource that is modified from our textbooks, you can do this really easily yourselves for your students. And I have a resource that steps you exactly through the whole process of how to create a print copy that other people can access through a URL.
All right, and I also put your email in chat
seriously.
too, so everybody can get it.
Thank you. I can't see that because my chat's frozen, but thank you. So yeah, I guess maybe we can, if I can't even get my screen back, and I will do whatever I can to fix this before next time for everybody that is able to make it next time. So the textbooks look very similar. Each one has slightly different features in the textbook. So the Child, Family, and Community textbook has some check-in times populated throughout the textbook. And then I don't like the color of this text. I think it's hard to read. So when I go back and fix this, in all my free time, I will probably change the color of the text away from the pink. And then has some graphics. There's the table of contents. Here's what it looks like in LibreText. And apparently they got efficient and they don't have any images on the tiles. So might have to bother them to fix that. And this is what that particular textbook, that's chapter 3, what that looks like when it's imported into your module. Here's the textbook in Spanish, very similar, but also in LibreText as well. The Google Group's very similar. It just doesn't have the PowerPoints and the videos. And so if you're using this textbook and you're creating anything, please consider sharing those out. Everybody is desperate for some starter resources, and just need people to have the ability and willingness to share those with everyone. I know that someone asked for observation and assessment videos. So this particular shell does have videos. Oh, this is an observation and assessment though. This is Child, Family, Community, sorry. We're not gonna get to observation and assessment probably, but all of the links are in that document. And it's just, the content is different, but everything is the same course to course. So here are the ones for Child, Family, and Community. Here is what the online course will look like, but it'll be customized to this particular textbook. And so there aren't enough chapters to have a chapter per module. So I'm going to look at what my faculty that are teaching the class, how they've divided up their course and figure out how to structure the course into weekly modules. And then we have, this is the assessment collection that June's working on for, and her team. It's not just June, it's her team. And I know that Cindy Stevens, my colleague at COC, was working on this class in particular, I believe. And so some discussions and some assignments. And so by the time you combine the video shells, the assessment shells, and our online courses, there should be a pretty robust collection of materials that people can remix into their own courses. And I think in the interest, I think I'll just click through the same slides for the observation and assessment textbooks real quick, and we can revisit these again next week if people are able to join again and are interested in these. And so this textbook has a slightly different color scheme, and so they went with the blue and the purple, and so they have some pinned things. This is an activity where the students are kind of given an example of, I think, gathering evidence. So like taking an anecdote, I think, a table, a graphic, the table of contents. This one they did put pictures, but they just used the same picture. So very interesting to see how they were imported. And then the Spanish version doesn't even have pictures. There's the Spanish version of the textbook. It also has a Google group. There aren't any supplemental resources shared for this one yet, but I'm hoping that will change. Here are the videos that might be helpful. And if possible, I will try and bring those into our complete shell, even if it's just a module of unpublished videos that faculty can find, trying to translate them into a slightly more usable format for faculty. Something that you can more easily remix. I hadn't thought about that until just this exact moment. So that's kind of an exciting thought. So some things on assessment, checklists, collaborating with families, work samples, documentation, curriculum, data collection, anecdotal records, students with disabilities or children with disabilities. So those are some of the videos for observation and assessment that are currently available. Again, the class will be structured the same way once I get it all together. It's the best of my ability. I'm going to be working with what my faculty share with me. And this right now, I think this must be incomplete because there aren't any assignments, but there are quiz banks in June's project, or the project that June is leading. So there will be some quizzes to, some quiz banks to pull from for those at least. But I think there should be some assignments there too, and I didn't see them in what I have access to yet. So I know I kind of went quickly through those things, but especially for people that aren't able to make it next week, I just wanted you to see that it's the same thing, just different book. So same kind of structure and same resources available. I'm trying to make things as consistent as possible. But yeah, we have a less than 5 minutes. So any questions, things that you would like me to follow up with more in detail, either in next week's or if the following one after Thanksgiving. So we have a few weeks before that third session, but things that you want me to prepare or follow up on, or be prepared to share a little bit more deeply with, you can pop that into the chat now, or you can drop me an email if it occurs to you. And I want to give you guys what you're looking for. So any guidance you can provide is helpful for me. But yeah, so questions, comments, anything at this point?
Well, if there's nobody who wants, oh, Donna, are you gonna ask a question?
You know I'm going to ask a question. So when you update the OERs, or when the OERs get updated, what is the process to make sure that they are updated across the different formats? Like,
so you have identified one of the other huge problems with OER, especially because I don't necessarily control where they go once I put them out. So I don't even have a way of tracking everywhere they go. So what I can commit to is the versions that I share in the Google group. There will be background version history. I will also ask that what COC shares on our webpage will provide a version history, and so that you can see that there's an update. If you're not already on the ECE OER email list, which I use to push out, myself and Amanda Tainter from Reedley College use to push out new releases, or inviting people to have our monthly conversations, the Zoom conversations, or I would love to start hosting some events again when I ever have sanity in order enough to coordinate such events where we can maybe get together and work on some of these resources. So that's a way to communicate. And so that's a place that I'll push out the revisions. I think right now our department's a little bit burnt. And so I don't know that I would expect revisions soon, as soon as I would like them, just because with all of our work on accreditation and just getting everything done and the pandemic, we're we're all a little fried. But yes, so I'll do my best. And because I do have a good relationship with LibreText, when they're updated, I will ask that the newer version, I haven't quite worked out how that's going to, because I can't go in and manually update it. But it may be easier for them to just harvest the new version and archive the previous version. But I would do that in a way that it wouldn't, archive might not be the right word, but just make it really clear, like revised version, so that people that are still using the original version. Yeah, and I'm not sure how LibreText has done that. I don't know if they're in a place where that they have a process for that yet. They've scaled up relatively recently, but so I'll reach out to Delmar and see what that looks like, and so that when that does happen, I can explain what that will look like on the platforms that I have control over. Now, as to wherever else the book is gone at this point, I have no idea how it will be kept current.
As long as it's on the Google Docs and Libra. But I take it the Lulu, would that get updated also? I would update those, and then what I can do with those, because it's not important that old version exists. Well, I guess maybe it is, if people are still using that. Now I get why using old textbooks or different versions of textbooks gets confusing. What I'll probably do is just make it really clear in the title that this is, revised or version. There is version history in the front matter of the textbook, but it'll need to be more transparent when we start creating, pushing out the revisions to everyone else. But yeah. And how do we make sure we're on that email list for the ECE OER group?
You would just email me, and if you get emails from me at least once a month inviting you to the conversation. And if you're not getting those emails, you're probably not on the list. But you could even just pop your email address in the chat now, and as soon as we hang up or in the session, I can add you to the list. So if you want to be on that list, for sure, I can do that relatively quickly. It's just a Google Doc that Amanda and I have access to.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I think I found something for you, Donna, for the attributions about OER. So let me share my screen 1 second, and let me get that ready for you. I'm gonna
if you can,
Jennifer. So give me one
yes,
moment.
if you can, because it won't let me. So
got it. I'll do it.
It's frozen. Okay.
All right. Are you able to see my screen?
We are not.
Oh.
It's
I just turned it
Jennifer.
on. Just Jennifer's? Oh no.
It's
just Jennifer's.
It's frozen on me.
You know what, Peter? If you could can you just send it? We have all our emails. Can you just send a link to us?
Yeah, I was just gonna put it in chat right now, but
great.
First, I'm gonna show the first. If you guys could see it, but this is the general.
Cannot.
Yeah, so this is a general page for our copyright information. Over here is the actual guidelines. They're from 2018, but on page 14, I believe, it goes more in detail how to give attributions for OER textbooks and information like that. And I'll give you another. I'm gonna give like maybe 2 or 3 more links too. Okay. So
yeah, and maybe that information could be more of a flyer or outside of that
PDF or something
like that. Something that's a little easier to reference than me dragging through 14 pages of district.
Yeah, I understand. So I'll see.
I don't work at the district offices anymore. I don't need to know all that stuff. My time there is finished.
Got it.
So, yeah, but it would be nice to be able to push that out for maybe convocation or when we go back the week before, that could go out to the department chairs, or it could be part of, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see what
we can do. Group. I don't know.
Maybe we can do like some kind of like OER checklist to make sure everything.
Yeah, you know how we have that syllabus thing that we can access through our dashboard, through my SDCCD, something like that.
Okay,
it's a quick reference. Oh, I got this.
Got it. I'll see what I can push and try to get that out for you guys then.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
And it looks like my chat has been frozen for a while. So if you have sent something to me through private chat and you think I'm ignoring you, I promise I'm not on purpose, but I have not gotten anything in the chat for a really long time. So I apologize if I missed things and you thought that I was getting them. I'm hoping to get when my in the meetings, I'll be able to go back and look at the chat. And so I'll look to see if there's anything that maybe I can bring up in a later session that I didn't get to today. So I apologize that Zoom and my computer are playing so not well. So yeah, thank you all for your time. We're over now. So I greatly appreciate all of you and what you're doing for your students, and that I get to play a small role in helping you guys do that.
I'm just for one happy that you had problems, because I teach synchronously, and it's nice to see that everybody has a problem.
Yeah, it's not just
Yeah,
you.
these are yeah, I think this is the biggest issue I've ever had. Like, I've never had like it consistently continue to be an issue. Like, I've had issues. I've even gotten booted out of things. In a presentation, like at a professional organization. Thankfully, I had a co-presenter, but I've never had it completely refused. Like, every time I try and do something with Zoom, I don't even know that I'm going to be able to end the meeting. I'm going to have to depend on I think Peter to end it, because I don't even have a leave button or end button right now. So it's a little maddening. So
thanks, Jennifer.
it is what it is.
Peter.
Yep.
You're
I'm
welcome.
emailing you now, Jennifer. So I appreciate it. And again, I do think you are the rock star of early childhood right now. And I tell Cindy
thank you.
that
I
all
am
the
really
time.
glad. Well, thank you. I'm glad to change the landscape of